Hello everyone, welcome back to our video podcast series for Southern New Hampshire University's Introduction to Religion class. This is the podcast that introduces Module 6, and we have a kind of an interesting topic coming up this week for our discussion board post. So I wanted to kind of really address the discussion board topic in this video. But first, I want to again commend you on your ability to really do an excellent job in the discussion board on the concept of sin and salvation in Buddhism and Christianity. I think you guys did an excellent job on that. You can read in the written announcement what my feelings were there. But this week, as we move into Module 6, we're talking about the question of human freedom in the discussion board post. Now, what is a free action? How do we define human freedom? Let's, for a working definition, say that a free act is an act that originates entirely in an individual person and is not compelled or forced by any outside force or anything other than a person's own will. And another way of saying that is that a person's actions are reducible to one's choices, and they're not attributable to other things. And while a person might take other things into account as as they make a decision, or as they come to a free choice, or they attempt to arrive at a free choice, it is by rights free and rightly called free, if and only if that action, if the choice on the will on the part of the individual is more than the sum of the factors that also influence that person. So I think we all, defining what a free choice is may be a little bit difficult, but I think we all know what one is. Anyway, I want to pose a little bit of a dilemma to you about human freedom, because it's a topic in philosophy that is really, it's a topic that everyone seems to pay attention to, always have, and it's not an easy topic to navigate, because some people argue that we certainly don't have free will, and others argue that it's so obvious that we do, but none of the hypotheses are really testable on either side. If I argue that my choice to do this video tonight was free, I can't really prove it, because we can't go back in time and show that it was. If I could have done something else than eat a turkey sandwich today for lunch, I can't go back and prove that such a thing is the case, that I could go back a second time, be in the same situation that I was before, and choose roast beef instead. So these arguments are a little bit difficult to navigate, but I'd like to maybe start off by proposing a problem to you. Maybe it's a false problem and a false dilemma that I'll set up, but maybe not, and I'll let you make that determination for yourself. In the discussion board this week, you're asked to think about whether or not how you would treat someone if you found out that their actions were not free, if they did not have free will, and how could you punish that person, and how could you deal with them on a moral level. Now, and the reason we ask this question is because the concept of free will is extremely important in a religious context. That question itself isn't really religious in nature, but the topic of human freedom is incredibly important. I think that's clear enough from what we've said, but let me pose this dilemma to you. I'm going to argue right now that we don't have free will. And I'm going to do so by using a quasi-religious, philosophically, philosophical argument that is a bit religious in nature. We talk about God. The argument goes like this. Okay. Either God exists or God does not exist. We can all agree on that. Now, if God exists, then we don't have free will. And if God does not exist, then we also don't have free will. Therefore, we don't have free will. That's a valid argument. Either A or B is the case. If A is the case, then C is the case. And if B is the case, then C is the case. Therefore, C is the case. That works. But let's add some meat and bones I should say meat on the bones of that argument. So, if God exists, why is it the case that we don't have freedom? Well, okay, let's look at it this way. God is all-powerful, all-loving, and, as we have discussed, omniscient, which means all-knowing. And God being eternal means that God is omnipresent to the past, present, and future. Put simply, this means that God knows exactly what you're going to do before you do it. So, I talked about the fact that I had a turkey sandwich for lunch today. Let's say I'm going to have a roast beef sandwich tomorrow. Right now, God knows what I'm going to have tomorrow for lunch. And God can never, ever, ever be wrong, by definition. So, if God knows what I'm going to have for lunch tomorrow and God can't be wrong, that means I must have whatever I'm going to have. So therefore, how could my choice be free if, by definition, I cannot choose otherwise? That's the first problem. God's knowledge of the future precludes human freedom because God knows what the future is going to be, and God can never be wrong. Therefore, the future is what it is based on God's knowledge of it and not based on our actions. And even if you want to argue, well, God's knowledge is based on his knowledge of our free actions, I can still counter with, could your actions have been otherwise? Could you have not done what God knew you were going to do? And of course the answer is no. Therefore, we can determine that your act is not, properly speaking, free, because you couldn't have done otherwise. Now, that's how we can say that there's no human freedom if God does exist. Now, if God doesn't exist, consider the following scenario. The Big Bang simply happened. I don't know that we can support that claim, but and we certainly can't support the claim that the universe has always existed. But let's say the Big Bang happens, and human evolution, after 4.5 billion years of Earth evolution and a prior 10 billion years of universe evolution, 10 billion years of universe, then the Earth is formed 4.5 billion years later. Well, no, wait, how does that work? I'm not sure how that works exactly. It could be the case that the Earth was formed prior to 4.5 billion years ago, but scientists certainly argue that life began 4.5 billion years ago. So let's just start at that point. 4.5 billion years ago, life is formed. Maybe some proteins in the primordial soup start forming into something that we might call life. And evolution progresses according to the natural laws and the laws of nature, and strictly biological, physical selection happens, and eventually humans emerge. Now, the humans that emerge from this strictly materialistic view of evolution and human history don't have any kind of a soul or an immaterial part of them. Okay, they're strictly material. They're biological in nature, and that is all they are. We're clumps of matter on this view. I don't think that we can meaningfully argue for a soul or anything spiritual about the human person without the existence of the supernatural, or God of some kind. So if we deny God's existence, we deny the existence of the supernatural, and we adopt the material view of the human person, then we must conclude that the human person is simply a ball of molecules that are reacting to each other this way and that. Now, if we locate the brain as the origin of choice and as the origin of the will, quote unquote, what choice becomes on the materialist view is simply the motions of molecules in your brain bouncing off each other and obeying the laws of physical matter. So on the materialist view, this means that what you refer to as choice is simply the physically deterministic result of the motions of molecules in your brain. So when I had a turkey sandwich today, could I have chosen otherwise? No, because at the moment that I arrived at the restaurant, my brain state, call it brain state 1, was a certain way. Now, based on the laws of nature and the physical laws that govern the universe and everything in it, including my brain and all the molecules, if those rules are applied to my brain at brain state 1, my brain will react in a certain way. This molecule will bounce off that one, this one will happen over here, this thing will happen over there, and eventually I blurt out, turkey sandwich, please. Now, that activity was completely deterministic. It was just like a roll of a pair of dice that comes up, with a 4 and a 5 on a pair of dice. If the initial conditions are the same at the beginning of every roll, and the roll is made with at the same angle, with the same speed, at the same force, you're going to get a 4 and a 5 every time. If the conditions are the same, the result will be the same. Sure, if you tweak just one tiny thing, the result might be different. But the question is, if the initial conditions are the same, will the result be the same? In the physically determined universe, yes, it will. Therefore, if your brain is just a bunch of molecules bouncing off of each other, human choice is nothing more than the product of those deterministic events that happen in your brain. And therefore, choice, again, is an illusion. So let's back up. In the beginning, I said, no matter what, if God exists or if God doesn't exist, you don't have free will. And of course, the reason we see now is because if God does exist, then divine foreknowledge precludes your ability to freely choose anything. Because, of course, God's knowledge of the future precludes your act being free because it couldn't be otherwise. And if God doesn't exist, then the world is materialistic and mechanistic and deterministic. And if that's the case, what you refer to as choice is simply the deterministic events that occur in your brain. It may feel free, but it's not, and it couldn't have been otherwise. So, that seems like a really dismal view of human freedom. Either God exists or he doesn't, but either way you go, there are problems for human freedom. Of course, I'll admit now that this is a false dilemma. I think there is room for human freedom if God does exist, and there's a good argument to prove that that's okay, and that that's a tenable position. And I also think that there's a good argument if God doesn't exist to still maintain that we have human freedom. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what they are. That would kind of ruin the effect of this exercise. But I would like you to consider it on your own and think about, how there could possibly be human freedom, or how you could argue against what I've said to you in this little session here. Because I think that A, it's a good exercise, and B, it might help you distill what is really important about human freedom and about the nature of the world in which we live. I think it's a really good philosophical exercise, and it's a good introduction to the problem of human freedom that is ever necessary for us to establish a position on when we confront questions like we are in the discussion board today and this week. So I leave you with that. Good luck in Module 6, and I will see you again on the discussion boards this week. And if anybody has any questions, by the way, on their rough drafts or papers or anything, or need any extra help, please, as always, feel free to contact me. Okay, see you later.